MSW Media.
So yeah, now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 212 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. I'm Allison Gill.
Hey, Allison, and I'm Harry Dunn. Today, we're going to talk about the lawsuit from 19 Democratic attorneys generals led by New York's Leticia James to block Elon Musk and his crew of teenage hackers from accessing the Treasury payment system, and Trump firing the head of the Office of Special Counsel's office, Hampton, Dellinger.
Yeah, and that's tricky. He's the special counsel of the special counsel's office. It's got nothing to do with Jack Smith or Robert Hur or anything. It's a totally different thing. We'll talk about that. And he's got a badass name too, Hampton Dellinger. So
Hampton Dellinger. That sounds pretty damn good.
Yeah, he's great. And that's, so we're going to talk about that. Also, we're going to talk about the fact that a judge has found that the defendants in the Arizona fraudulent electors case have met a threshold for proving that Attorney General Chris Mays was, quote, motivated by a desire to deter, retaliate against, or prevent the lawful exercise of a constitutional right. So we'll talk about that, and the judge is giving her a chance to respond. Plus, we have some not so happy updates on Eric Adams, Rod Blagojevich, and Steve Bannon.
Double.
Yeah, double. But first, before we get to our new patrons that I want to thank, I want to ask you about your trip that you're on right now.
Yeah, so I think this is becoming a thing now. I'm getting used to recording in hotel rooms all across the country. I am back in Wisconsin, and earlier today I was in La Crosse, and when I got out the car, it was 5 degrees. I did a big press conference there. They have a big Supreme Court race in the state, April the 1st, and it's important for me to be out here. One of the people that's running, Brad Schimmel, he failed to condemn the pardons. Not only did he fail to condemn them, he also praised Trump and acknowledged him and saying he was right. Well, obviously within his right to do it. But he said that the January 6th defendants were not giving a fair shot. And anytime I could push back, I'm going to do it. And I'm planning on coming out here probably about 1 or 2 more times before April 1st election. But it is freezing. After we did that, we took a 3-hour car ride, and now we're in Green Bay, and we're going to repeat and do it again tomorrow.
Good. Yeah. And I mean, pretty much every single judge disagrees with that, characterization of the convictions of January 6ers. Like they're like, yeah, no, the pardons are terrible. If anyone knows what it's like to be afforded due process, it's Donald Trump. I mean, that guy got away with everything.
He's benefited more from anybody, more of it than anybody in this entire world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's he's always contradicting himself. So we don't need to talk about that hypocrisy.
Tell me about it.
But we do have some new patrons to thank. New patrons of Clean Up on Aisle 45. If you want to become a patron, get these episodes early and ad-free, you can do it at patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE 45POD. And Harry, I'm going to ask you after we get offline here about whether or not, or when we're going to have our next happy hour.
Yes, we need to schedule that up. We need to schedule. Yeah, we'll definitely get that scheduled because I know a lot of people have been asking about it, and Lord knows we could use one. So that'll be coming soon. So stay tuned.
Yep. And so thank you to our new patrons, Patrinka Selland, Tamelia Renee, Robin M., Tiz Arnold, Amy Vile Pondo, Kim Yvette, Sylvia, Kate Van Houten, and Free the Bookshelf, which I love. All right. So, Harry, there are about 50 lawsuits that have been filed against the Trump administration in the past 20 days. And we're going to focus on one of them today. And by the way, if you want to see a repository of all these ongoing lawsuits, they have a really great one at Just Security. I've shared the link on my Blue Sky feed for you. But we're going to talk about one of these lawsuits today. And this is the lawsuit barring Musk and his teenage Doge bags from accessing the Treasury Department payment system. We have like $5 trillion of payments that go through that office. And this suit was brought by a group of Democratic attorneys general, like you said, led by Leticia James. She's the attorney general in New York. She's the one who brought the successful $500 million fraud case against Trump and his businesses.
You know what? Just thinking about this real quick, these are teenagers, 18 and 19-year-old kids. Now, get it, like 18-year-olds, they're obviously adults, they're able to vote and everything like that. But what type of real world experience did they have? And it's mind blowing outside of the the court case itself.
Yeah, pretty much all they know how to do is fuck shit up, right? But that's why they
pretty
were
much
brought on.
At this age, that's all you kind of really know how to do. I mean, we've all been 18 and 19. I'm nothing against them. We've all been that age before, but really, but the lawsuit, it goes in to say Cheney and Gerstein, right for Politico, filed in federal court in Manhattan, argues that granting access to the staffers from Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Now, it's important to point out, they put the so-called in there. I was able to talk to some attorneys, and they said we're going to keep on referring to it as the so-called because there's nothing established in the federal government called Doge. So that's so-called. And I'm glad that they're doing that. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency puts at risk billions of dollars in grants, health insurance payments, and tax refunds that the states of their residents receive each year. The states also allege that Doge's access increases the possibilities that confidential information about recipients of the payments could be exposed publicly. Musk and Doge have no authority to access Americans' private information and some of our country's most sensitive data, said New York Attorney General Leticia James, again, who was leading the complaint. I'm taking action to keep our information secure.
Yeah, she's amazing. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's named as a defendant in the suit, told Bloomberg News Thursday that only 2 of the Doge members have been granted access to the payments database, and they were limited to read-only viewing of the data. Of course, Wired magazine came out and said, no, they had write data too, WRITE data. Or access as well. Bessent commented before one member of the Doge team with access to the payment data, Marco Alez, resigned after a Wall Street Journal report about racist messages he posted to social media. Musk said Friday that Alez would be rehired. And then on Saturday, February 8th, the federal judge named Paul Engelmeyer, an Obama appointee, thanks Obama, blocked access to the Treasury system for political appointees and Musk, citing irreparable harm. He also ordered the destruction of any downloaded information from the payment system by anyone given access to it since January 20th, citing, quote, the risk that the new policy presents of the disclosure of sensitive and confidential information and the heightened risk that the systems in question will be more vulnerable than before to hacking. And he set a hearing on the matter for tomorrow.
It's just so even crazy just to think that who in their right mind think that this is a good, safe, smart idea? It's insane. Yeah. Then on Monday, February 10th, 5 former Treasury secretaries penned an op-ed for the New York Times saying, while significant data privacy, cybersecurity, and national security threats are gravely concerning, the constitutional issues are perhaps even more alarming than cybersecurity and national security. That's very telling right there. A key component of the rule of law is the executive branch's commitment to respect Congress's power of the purse. The legislative branch has the sole authority to pass laws that determine where and how federal dollars should be spent. Many people and entities depend on the Treasury's faithful disbursement of federal funds. Social Security checks arrive each month. Veterans receive their benefits. Medicare providers are reimbursed. Federal workers, members of the military, and businesses that provide goods and services to the government are paid all on time and in full. Holders of the outstanding federal debt receive interest payments.
Yep. And they go on to say, during our service in the Treasury Department, faced moments of crisis when the specter of an American default loomed. Any hint of the selective suspension of congressionally authorized payments will be a breach of trust and ultimately a form of default. And our credibility, once lost, will prove difficult to regain. So very powerful op-ed here by these 5 former Treasury Department officials.
It's even telling, though, obviously they mention obviously the national security threats. That's the number one concern on most people's mind. Are we safe here? Are we safe? But they said even more important than national security is the constitutionality of what is being done. So in a word, in a sense, they are in fear for democracy. They dissent is literally what they just said with that.
Yeah, it's pretty telling, right? That national security and cybersecurity take a back seat to the unconstitutional nature of what these guys are doing. And it's sort of it kind of belies, I think, most Americans' understanding of how important the power of the purse is. I think a lot of people are finding out, with the another thing that happened where all the federal funds were frozen, like the Inflation Reduction Act funds and the Infrastructure Act funds, and a different judge put a restraining order on that too. But for example, there's farmers who, under the Inflation Reduction Act, were told by the government, Joe Biden, hey, you go ahead and buy $75,000 worth of solar panels to upgrade your farm, and we'll reimburse you half of that. And so they did. And now, because the federal funds are frozen and the Trump administration is in violation of that restraining order, they aren't getting that money. And so I think some people are kind of getting hints here and there as to what these blocks on federal funding means. Now, the Treasury, they haven't done that yet, but I have to assume that the reason they're giving access to Elon Musk is so that he can just turn off funding where he wants to turn off funding. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons that the 19 attorneys general filed for this restraining order. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, let's see how it plays out. It's interesting to see, especially given Elon Musk is throwing a temper tantrum about it. So stay tuned for that.
He's a big boy. He's totally an adult. All right. Trump's Department of Justice, by the way, has filed to dissolve Judge Engelmeyer's restraining order, or hoping to narrow it at least. And the judge gave them a few hours to hash it out. Apparently, they didn't really reach an agreement. And we'll talk about that and her ruling right after this break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
All right, Joe, welcome back. Before the break, we left off with a judge blocking Trump allies from accessing the Treasury payment system, and an op-ed written by 5 former Treasury secretaries about the constitutionality of freezing Treasury payments. Now, we'll talk about Trump's new motion to narrow or completely toss out Judge Engelmeyer's order. Again, from Politico, the Trump administration is making an urgent push to end a court order barring top officials' access to the federal government's massive payment system operated by the Treasury Department, saying the remarkable intrusion is unconstitutional and should be dissolved immediately. Basic democratic accountability requires that every executive agency's work be supervised by politically accountable leadership who ultimately answer to the president. Justice Department attorneys wrote in the 11-page filing calling the order impermissible and anti-constitutional.
Yeah, no, trying to seize the power of the purse is what's anti-constitutional. But the attorneys are asking Manhattan-based U.S. District Judge Jeanette Vargas to quickly end or modify Engelmeyer's restraining order to ensure that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and his top leadership can be briefed on the payment system and perform their legally required roles. Justice Department lawyers say that they are negotiating with the states to come up with a quick agreement to narrow Engelmeyer's order. And early Monday, Vargas said that if they failed to reach an agreement by 5 p.m., she would demand an expedited review of the matter by late Monday night. And in that filing, the Justice Department emphasized that the Treasury officials have been adhering to strict limits imposed by Engelmeyer. Only one official covered by the order, Musk ally Thomas Krause, had access to the system prior to the judge's restriction. And in a 7-page statement, Krause emphasized that he has discontinued access and says he's complied with the order's limits. Now, prior to those limits, Krause said his access was considered over the shoulder, meaning he could view data accessed by other authorized Treasury employees as well as copies of source code. The Justice Department indicated that a second Musk ally, Marco Alez, who I talked about earlier, who resigned last week amid a furor over racist social media posts, had previously had access to copies of the code in a sandbox environment. And real quick, I'll just tell you, sandbox environment means you can go and play around with the code offline. It doesn't actually mess with the actual code. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow. I'm learning. It's so funny. I'm learning so many of these terms, as a lot of us are. And one other thing that I'm learning a lot about, I have learned way too many judges' names that I care to know. Like all these judges that are having to step in and save the damn world. My God, God bless them all. But Trump's DOJ and the Democratic attorneys general did not reach an agreement by Monday at 5. And the attorney generals filed a memorandum of law in opposition to Trump's request to nullify or modify the restraining order. They say it is imperative that the TRO, temporary restraining order, remain in place to maintain the status quo that existed under the prior access policy in place prior to January 20th, 2025, before Donald Trump took office. Defendants have failed to explain why their concerns are insufficiently addressed by permitting political appointees to be briefed on the operations of the BFS systems by the small group of staff who have historically had direct access to those systems, which contain personal identifying information, PII, and confidential bank account information. There is no reason a political appointee would need direct access to the systems to perform their supervisory functions, and certainly no need for such access between now and Friday's preliminary injunction hearing.
Yeah, that's one big part of their argument is like, okay, maybe you need it, but why do you need it today? Now, first they argue that the restraining order doesn't stop Treasury appointees from doing their jobs. This is the Democratic attorneys general. They argue that while the order prevents them from accessing the system, it doesn't prevent people actually authorized to access it from briefing the appointees on it. Further, the defendants actually conceded, this is the Trump side, actually conceded that the appointees, quote, do not ordinarily need to access or receive data from such systems, nor did the Trump side bother to explain at all why the appointees do need that access. In fact, their sole support for the argument that they need access comes from Krauss, who's only been there 3 weeks and can't possibly know or understand why an appointee would need access to these systems. Quote, noticeably absent is any sworn testimony from any appointee stating that it's important for him or her to have access to the BFS payment systems, much less to have such access before Friday. Indeed, the defendant's submission does not identify a single instance in which such access had or would be necessary.
How funny is that? Noticeably absent is any sworn testimony. Of course it's not. Of course it's absent. And remember that op-ed from the 5 former Treasury secretaries? Yeah, the Democratic attorney general cite in this filing saying, moreover, as 5 former Treasury secretaries have confirmed in an editorial published in the New York Times today, the nation's payment system has historically been operated by a very small group of nonpartisan career civil servants, including the fiscal assistant secretary, whose duties have now been delegated to Mr. Krauss, but for the prior 8 decades have been reserved exclusively for civil servants to ensure their impartiality and public confidence in the handling and payments of federal funds. The former Treasury secretaries explained with compelling force why political appointees would have no need to access the BFS records or systems. Political actors have not been subject to the same rigorous ethics rules as civil servants. They lack training and experience to handle private personal data like Social Security numbers and bank account information. Their power subjects America's payment systems and highly sensitive data within to the risk of exposure, potentially to our adversaries, and our critical infrastructures is at risk of failure if the code that underwrites it is not handled with due care.
Yeah, 100%. And then they go on to argue that the restraining order is not appealable, and they cite a bunch of case law to that effect. Further, staying the restraining order would restore the appointee's access that had already been determined to have caused harm. And then they conclude, quote, for the foregoing reasons, the states respectfully request the defendant's emergency motion be denied in all respects, except for the minor modifications set forth in point 3 above, and that their request for a stay of the TRO of the restraining order as modified pending any appeal be denied. And so some of the minor modifications were to allow like read-only access to people confirmed by the Senate, right? And just about an hour ago, Judge Vargas issued a ruling on this. She denied Trump's motion to dissolve the temporary restraining order, but she did allow appointed and confirmed Treasury officials to access the system. The language that changed is that now it says, except that this order shall not apply to any officer of the United States Department of the Treasury nominated by the president and confirmed by the United States Senate. So she agreed with the plaintiffs in this case. So that's good. So now, like, Besant has, like, he can do his over the shoulder thing that Krauss was doing or whatever. But he's not supposed to go in there and modify any code. And of course, it still stands that anybody who accessed any of that information and printed it out or downloaded it has to destroy it. I'm not sure how they're going to enforce that, but that's part of the order as well.
I'm glad that they're doing it. I mean, like, thank God bless our judges. You know, just Jesus, man, what's going on? And so many, like, people that have not had training, that have to live up to the ethics standards, people that have not confirmed by the Senate, or people that can't even drink alcohol yet. These guys are 18 and 19 years old. Like, if you haven't taken a shot of tequila and wanted to throw up, you should not be able to look at people's social security numbers. My goodness, man. Here we are. Look, God bless our judges.
And kind of like regardless of their age, even if they were like 40-year-old dudes or whatever, if you haven't been trained in these areas and you have no experience in the Treasury or the payment system or the BFS, you shouldn't have access to it.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
All right, everybody, we've got a really great story coming up, but we have to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. All right, our next story is a really good one. Let's start with a simple question. What is the Office of Special Counsel? It's not got anything to do, like I said, with special counsels appointed to investigate stuff like Jack Smith or John Durham or Ken Starr or Jaworski. The U.S. Office of Special Counsel, or OSC, you'll hear us refer to it as, is an independent federal investigative and prosecutorial agency. And OSC's statutory authority comes from 4 federal laws: the Civil Service Reform Act, the Whistleblower Protection Act, the Hatch Act, and the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So OSC's primary mission is to safeguard the merit system by protecting federal employees and applicants from prohibited personnel practices, especially reprisal for whistleblowing. OSC also operates as a secure channel for federal employees to blow the whistle by disclosing wrongdoing. Federal law establishes a unique process for disclosures made to the Office of Special Counsel intended to protect the confidentiality of the whistleblower and ensure that the alleged wrongdoing is investigated and, where necessary, corrected. In addition, OSC enforces the Hatch Act, which I know a little bit about. It puts certain restrictions on partisan political activity by government employees. It also protects civilian employment and reemployment rights of military service members. So the head of the OSC is appointed to a 5-year term and by law can only be fired for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. The current special counsel is a guy named Hampton Dellinger.
Hampton Dellinger. Mike, like you said earlier, what a name. He's right for this moment.
Totally. I want somebody to draw a comic book about Hampton Dellinger.
Hampton Dellinger. On Friday night, February 7th, Donald Trump fired Dellinger. And on Monday, Dellinger sued him. His lawsuit says, on the night of February 7th, 2025, President Trump disregarded clear statutory language and in a one-sentence email purported to terminate Special Counsel Dellinger. That email made no attempt to comply with the Special Counsel's for-cause removal protection. It simply stated, on behalf of President Donald J. Trump, I am writing to inform you that your position as Special Counsel of the United U.S. Office of Special Counsel is terminated effective immediately. President Trump's purported removal of Special Counsel Dellinger is unlawful. It has no basis, in fact, and thus cannot be squared with the statutory text. And it is in direct conflict with nearly a century of precedent that defines the standard for removal of independent agency officials and upholds the legality and virtually identical for-cause removal protections for the heads of independent agencies.
And the lawsuit goes on to say, as the special counsel for the Office of Special Counsel, Mr. Dellinger brings this action against President Trump, the director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office, the Office of Special Counsel, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Office of Management and Budget, seeking a declaratory judgment, an injunction, and, on an emergency basis, a temporary restraining order to prevent the deprivation of his statutory entitlements to exercise the duties of his office. The Office of Special Counsel is an independent agency of the United States. In 1978, Congress first established the OSC within the Merit Systems Protections Board, that's the MSPB, as part of the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978. The CSRA was enacted to address widespread public concerns about the federal civil service, including evidence that it was vulnerable to political manipulation, and it failed to protect whistleblowers. Jimmy Carter signed this into law in 1978. And then in 1989, Congress again responded to concerns that whistleblowers within the federal civil service were not adequately protected with the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989. And with that law, Congress vested the OSC with new authorities to receive complaints from whistleblowers and to protect them from retaliation. The act also removed the Office of Special Counsel from its place within the MSPB and established it as an independent agency.
On October 3rd, 2023, President Biden nominated plaintiff Hampton Dellinger to be special counsel of the Office of Special Counsel. The Senate confirmed Mr. Dellinger on February 27, 2024, and he was sworn in as special counsel on March 6, 2024. Mr. Dellinger's 5-year term expires in 2029. The OSC's ability to protect civil service and investigate alleged misconduct is needed now more than ever. Absolutely, right? Over the preceding 3 weeks, an unprecedented number of federal employees with civil service protections have been terminated without cause. Well, we know what the cause is. The cause is you're not loyal to Donald Trump.
Right.
Simple. Senior career officials have been purged from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. 18 inspectors generals from across the federal government have been removed without justification required by statute. And hundreds of federal employees have been locked out of their computer systems by the U.S. Doge Service Temporary Organization. President Trump has also attempted to remove board member Gwen Wilcox from the National Labor Relations Board despite clear statutory for-cause removal protection.
It goes on to say that Special Counsel Dellinger requests that the court do the following things. Number 1, declare that the president's termination of plaintiff Hampton Dellinger was unlawful, and that plaintiff Hampton Dellinger is the special counsel and head of the special counsel's office, the Office of Special Counsel. Number 2, declare that special counsel of the Office of Special Counsel may be removed by the president only for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Number 3, or C, declare that Karen Gorman is not the acting special counsel of the Office of Special Counsel, nor may any other individual serve as the acting special counsel or the head of the Office of Special Counsel.
So I like that. I like that third point. Dellinger also asked the court that he order that plaintiff Hampton Dellinger may not be removed from his office as special counsel or in any way be treated as having been removed, denied, or obstructed in accessing any of the benefits or resources of his office, or otherwise be obstructed from his ability to carry out duties. Also, order that defendants Besant, Gore, Kamen, and Vaught may not place an acting special counsel in plaintiff Hampton Dellinger's position or otherwise recognize any other person as special counsel or as the agency head of special counsel. Also, order defendants Besant, Gore, Gorman, Kamen, and Vaught to pay plaintiff Hampton Dellinger's all wages and benefits owed to him as special counsel of the Office of Special Counsel. And finally, award all other appropriate relief.
I like how they're like, oh, and also you still have to pay him, because that's some shit that they would pull, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like an Office Space. Well, we just told HR to stop paying him, so the problem will take care of itself. Like,
yeah. Isn't that crazy? You have, yes, by the way, pay me.
Yeah. Now, guess who got this case? Guess which judge got this case? Judge Amy Berman Jackson got this case. And in a minute order, on the same day the lawsuit was filed, she says, pending before the court is plaintiff's motion for a temporary restraining order. The court received the motion shortly after it was docketed and assigned this morning. And it was occupied with another hearing for most of the day. That's what she says. I was busy all day. So I'm set a scheduling conference at 4:30 p.m. And at that hearing, counsel for the defendants represented that they did not receive the motion until early afternoon and had not yet had an opportunity to file a response. Counsel also indicated that the defendants were unable to take a position as to whether they'd be willing to freeze the firing until the court resolved the issues. The court heard some arguments from both sides with respect to the factors it must consider in connection with the motion, and it appreciates the fact that the lawyers were both ready to address them orally, at least in part, this afternoon. But the court has not yet had the benefit of a written submission by the defendants. That's Trump's side. Therefore, the defendant's opposition to the motion will be due by noon tomorrow, February 11th, 2025. That's yesterday as you're listening to this. Given the court's concerns about the potential irreparable harm occasioned by the challenged firing of the special counsel, a presidential appointee confirmed by the Senate to serve a 5-year term who may be removed by the president only for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance, and given the significant statutory and constitutional issues involved, the court will defer ruling on the motion until after it has received and considered the defendant's submission. But in the meantime, in the interim, though, to preserve the status quo, which the D.C. Circuit has described as the regime in place before the challenged action, the court will issue a brief administrative stay. An administrative stay, quote, buys the court time to deliberate. It does not typically reflect the court's consideration of the merits, but instead reflects a first blush judgment about the relative consequences of the case. While administrative stays are more common in appellate courts, the district court has recognized their applicability in cases seeking emergency relief, including in this district. As these courts have recognized, the, quote, authority for an administrative stay arises from the All Writs Act and a court's inherent authority to manage its docket. Therefore, it is hereby ordered that from the time of this order through midnight February 13th, 2025, plaintiff Hampton Dellinger shall continue to serve as special counsel of the Office of Special Counsel, the position he occupied at 7:22 p.m. on Friday, February 7th, when he received an email from the president. And the defendants may not deny him access to the resources and materials of that office or recognize the authority of any other person as special counsel. This period may only be extended by further order of the court. So ordered, signed, Judge Amy Berman Jackson. So she says, I don't have enough right now to even issue any of this, but I am going to order that Dellinger is back in his job, has to be given the full authority to do his job. You can't say anybody else is the special counsel, the Office of Special Counsel, until I get a brief and consider this further. And at that point, she will decide whether or not to extend the temporary stay against his firing and let him stay in office while she considers further briefing and sets a preliminary injunction hearing. So good job, Dellinger.
Absolutely. Two things stand out to me with this. Before January 6th, the D.C. court, that building, they always had business in there. But January 6th caused a flurry of every single judge's calendar to be booked. Every single one had a full docket ahead of them. It wasn't many free days after January 6th when these individuals started getting prosecuted. Now, January 6th cases are, obviously have halted. They're all pardoned and everything like that. So now the judges, before it was like, all right, now what do we do? Now they're are taking on Trump's DOJ.
Right, they got plenty of free time to hit him with restraining orders.
It's insane. What are they doing? And the other thing that stands out to me is the DOJ has never been the defendant in so many cases, so back to back to back. It's usually the DOJ is the plaintiff a lot of times, in American courts, or they have been the defendant in more suits in the last 2-3 weeks that I could remember over the last 4 years. This is insane. But
or at least representing the defendants.
Representing the defense, correct. Yeah. So I'm rooting for the plaintiffs in these cases. Here we go.
Yes, indeed. And we'll follow them here. All right. So everybody, we've got a couple more stories, but we have to take one last quick break. So stick around. We'll be right back.
All right, y'all. Welcome back. We have a couple of quick stories to round out the show today. First, from the Arizona Republic. 2 days of hearings in Arizona's fake elector case begin Monday. Remember that? The fake electors? They're still going on in the States, with defense lawyers expected to retread ground that was covered while a different judge presided over the case. Maricopa County Supreme Court Judge Sam Myers was expected to hear defense lawyers argue that the case against their client should be dismissed under Arizona's anti-SLAPP statute. That exception took a turn minutes into Monday's hearing when Myers surprised lawyers and said the day would not be spent on oral arguments over the issue.
Yeah, instead, the judge said that the defendants had met an early threshold for the anti-SLAPP arguments to move forward and ordered the Attorney General's office to submit a written response. Meyer said the court has a two-part process for determining whether the law was violated, the SLAPP law. First, defendants make their arguments to the court. Based on those arguments, he said, the court determines whether the defendant established a sufficient proof that the charges were substantially motivated by a desire to deter, retaliate against, or prevent the lawful exercise of a constitutional right. Meyer said the level of proof needed has been tricky for courts to define, and he said Arizona's appellate courts have, on occasion, described it as, quote, constituting a sufficient showing, merits a reasonable inference, or warrants a further fuller exploration. The anti-SLAPP arguments the fake electors defendants made met that proof, Meyer said. So he's going with the lower bar here. Quote, the court finds that the defendant's motion that does include information that the charges in this case include, at least in part, some arguably lawful exercise of their right to petition and speech. Defendants' motions also include information that the Attorney General has made statements in the past suggesting that what happened in this case should never happen again, which they argue shows a desire to deter the actions that were alleged in the case.
Now, Meyer said, the state must respond. He ordered prosecutors to file a response by late March to show that the charges were justified by law and that Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays did not pursue the indictments in retaliation. He did not grant or deny any of the defendants' motions to dismiss the case based on the anti-SLAPP law. Mays said in a statement she opposed Meyer's ruling. We disagree with this ruling and we will pursue an appeal, Mays said. It is not the lawful exercise of free speech to file forged slates of electors to deprive Arizona voters of their right to vote.
Yeah, so here's hoping this is just the judge being extra cautious, right? This judge was appointed to Arizona Superior Court by Democrat Janet Napolitano, I think, in 2007. And so this seems to me like you get into court to argue anti-SLAPP and the judge is like, you know what, we're not going to argue that today. I think that the defendants have a colorable argument here under law that possibly because of some stuff that the Attorney General said, it might, deter them from exercising their constitutional rights in the future. So rather than have a big argument and talk about whether or not I'm going to dismiss the case on anti-SLAPP grounds, I am just going to say, you've made a showing, so I am now going to need the Attorney General to respond by the end of March, and then I will take those arguments into consideration, and I'll let y'all know what I think after that. So I think it's either a kind of a time saver or just, you know what? Yeah, let's get an argument in here because if you don't and you go forward with this case and then after conviction they appeal and say we didn't get a chance to argue our anti-SLAPP shit, then you might have grounds for appeal. So I think this is just maybe, hopefully, the judge tying up loose ends and that the case will end up going forward. We'll see.
And also maybe like you said, playing it extra safe because Lord knows this will make it to the Supreme Court, and they want to make sure that all
Court of Arizona
of the state, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And we saw a lot of this in all of the Trump, litigation and prosecution. They're like, well, let's just make sure we go down this road and everybody's fully briefed and we tie up that loose end so it doesn't pop up its ugly head again in an appeal. All right. So this is a real downer of a story, this next one, because I'd been hoping that you and I, Harry, would get to spend the first few weeks of March covering Steve Bannon's trial.
Man.
But no. From CBS, Steve Bannon pled guilty to a single charge on Tuesday for his role in a plot to defraud donors to a nonprofit devoted to building a wall on the southern border. Bannon won't serve time behind bars under this agreement, which was laid out during a hearing in New York courtrooms on Tuesday. In exchange for pleading guilty to one count of scheming to defraud in the first degree, he received a sentence of conditional discharge for 3 years. During that time, Bannon is forbidden from serving as the director of any nonprofit in New York, and he's forbidden from raising money for charities with assets in the state. He was also forbidden from using donor data stemming from the scheme. So he somehow weaseled his way out and isn't going to jail.
Why did Alvin Bragg even offer a plea deal?
I don't understand. I don't understand that
I don't
at all.
understand that. Same. I don't understand. You didn't even have to offer a plea deal. You had him, the term dead to rights. You had him. And you didn't. Listen, yeah, nobody likes spending money on taxes, but I don't think that the majority of New York's taxpayers would have minded an opportunity to send Steve Bannon to jail or to pay a couple extra dollars to prosecute that case. And I don't think that was one of the factors anyway. But
No.
why? This blows my mind. Why did this happen?
Yeah. Now, we all know that prosecutors would rather get a guilty plea so that they don't have to go to trial, risk an appeal, risk an acquittal. But to make the deal without jail time, I think, is really weird because he was facing years.
Yeah, but say what was he facing?
Well, it's hard to know because he's already a felon. No, misdemeanor. It was misdemeanor.
Sure.
So maybe like 4, 5, 6. I mean, the maximum I think was 15 or something like that. But we never get close to the maximums really. But years, at least, multiple years. So I'm a little bit, I don't know. I'm disheartened by this. And I would really like it if Alvin Bragg came out and said, here's why, here's my thoughts on this. Here's why I did this. It's why it's better for New Yorkers, why it's better for the system, why it's better for justice, because it only seems like Trump and his allies get to walk,
Yeah. I guess we'll be following that and bring you all any updates of why Alvin Bragg decided to do that. But I definitely think he owes it to, we're not residents of New York, but he definitely owes it to the people of New York to explain his decision, why he decided to do. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt at the moment. But I'm angry about this,
Right. Like, why do other people have to go to jail, but not this guy? Explain it to us so that we can maintain our faith in the justice system.
And you know what? To continue with the theme of disappointing stories, from CBS, the Department of Justice told federal prosecutors in New York to drop their corruption case against Mayor Eric Adams, citing his restricted ability to help the Trump administration enforce its immigration policies. Unbelievable. Acting Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais sent a memo instructing prosecutors in the Southern District of New York to abandon the charges. You are directed, as authorized by the Attorney General, to dismiss the pending charges, Beauvais wrote in a memo Monday, adding that the department reached this conclusion without assessing the strength of evidence or the legal theories on which the case is based, and in no way calls into question the integrity and efforts of prosecutors who brought the case. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
We reached this conclusion without reading any of it.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I know. Instead, Beauvais wrote that the timing of the charges and the former U.S. attorney who brought the case created appearances of impropriety. So he said, I'm not calling into question your integrity, prosecutors, but you did have an appearance of impropriety. And that the probe into Adams' office had unduly restricted Mayor Adams' ability to devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigration and violent crime that occurred in his city under President Joe Biden. That's his thing. Beauvais added that the charges against Adams can be reconsidered by the Southern District of New York after the November 2025 New York City mayoral election. Sure, Jan, I'm real sure you're going to let them prosecute him again. The decision to drop the charges will still need to be formally submitted by prosecutors and approved by the judge overseeing the case. So the judge still has to approve this. So that'll be interesting.
It will be. Will it happen? I just keep going back to Beauvais saying, in no way are we questioning your integrity or your... But Donald Trump questioned the integrity of the offices, of people, him being prosecuted in New York. Now, yes, it was state charges versus federal, but it's just super interesting. And another thing, President Donald Trump has signed an executive order pardoning Rod Blagojevich. I never could say his name right, but y'all know who I'm talking about. The former Illinois governor who was sentenced to 14 years in prison before Trump commuted his sentence in 2020.
Yeah, so he didn't pardon him back then. He just commuted his sentence, got him out of jail, but now he's given him a full pardon.
I guess he could see him as a useful idiot now.
Yeah, that, and he committed the same kind of fraud that Trump did, and Trump's real big on dismissing charges against people who commit fraud. Except probably, I don't think we'll see a dismissal of the Menendez case of bribery and fraud. Probably not there.
Probably not there.
Because I don't think he can do anything for Donald Trump or his administration.
At all. And wouldn't it be telling if Menendez seeks out that pardon?
Oh, I'm sure he's called up, right?
You would have to,
I'm sure
right?
he's called him.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But we're in
So here we
unbelievable
are.
times. We are in unbelievable times, and it's, guys, we're going to bring you all the news here, and the good and the bad. But the number one thing is you have to stay educated and informed about what's going on. And we appreciate you all tuning into us each and every week and trusting us to bring you all the news.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. And thanks to our new patrons again. If you want to become a patron, again, that's patreon.com/aisle45pod, AISLE45POD. We really, really thank you all. Everyone who listens to this, again, we couldn't do this without you, even folks who just listen on the public feed. So thank you. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here today, Harry?
Yes. You know what? I did a rally. Well, not a rally, a press conference, kind of whatever those things are called when you talk to the masses. And, a lot of people are asking me, Harry, what can we do? They ask you that, Allison, what can we do? Listen, the public pressure, it works. Keep on doing it. But to actually make a difference, it's not going to take a big protest. It's not going to take a resolution that means anything that will fail. It's going to take moral courage from some of these elected officials, some of these judges, congressmen, senators, to stand up and stop this gentleman. Donald Trump, he doesn't care. He's in the White House. But these races, these people, these senators, these congressmen and women, they answer to you all every 2 years. So let's keep that pressure on them. Do not let up. Make phone calls, write postcards, get involved in local elections, and stay motivated, guys. Stay motivated.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much for that, Harry. Take breaks when you need to and then get back in the fight. That's what I always say. So we'll be back in your ears next week. Harry and I are going to be hammering out when we're going to have that next happy hour for patrons. And so keep an eye on your email inbox that you use to sign up for Patreon. So we'll be putting out that information shortly, and we'll be back in your ears next week. Until then, thank you so much. I've been Allison Gill.
Harry Dunn. Thanks, y'all.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.